The last time a Speaker of the House vote went beyond the first round of voting was in 1923, 100 years ago. Well, that changed this year as political chaos came to Capitol Hill on day one of a new Congress.
I have the record for the longest speech ever on the floor. I don't have a problem getting a record for the most votes for Speaker, too.
Republican leader Kevin McCarthy knew it would be an uphill battle. While the California Republican clearly campaigned for the Speaker's gavel, he couldn't lock up the necessary support from within his own party, even as Republicans took back control of the House chamber.
They placed the name of my friend and colleague from Arizona, Andy Biggs, for Speaker of the House.
That formal challenge took enough votes away from McCarthy to send the House into a second round for the first time in a century. Ohio Republican Jim Jordan urged his party to rally around McCarthy.
My favorite scripture verse is 2 Timothy 4:7. Paul's the old guy giving advice to the young guy, and he says, fight the good fight, finish the course, keep the faith. I like the verse because it's a verse of action. Fight, finish, keep. Not wimpy words, words that I think fit America. That's what the American people want us to do.
But another twist saw Matt Gaetz, a member leading the charge against McCarthy, nominate Jordan for the Speaker position.
Sometimes we have to do jobs that we don't really want to do. And sometimes we have to do jobs that we are called to do. And so, my colleagues, I rise to nominate the most talented, hardest working member of the Republican conference, who just gave a speech with more vision than we have ever heard from the alternative. I'm nominating Jim Jordan.
A second and third round loss for McCarthy followed, with the chamber agreeing to adjourn until Wednesday.
Matt Gaetz said, I don't care if we go to plurality and we elect Hakeem Jeffries and it hurts the new frontline members not to get reelected. Well, that's not about America, and I will always fight to put the American people first, not a few individuals that want something for themselves. So we may have a battle on the floor, but the battle is for the conference and the country, and that's fine with me.
For Democrats, they all backed Hakeem Jeffries, and that's also historically significant because he became the first ever black man to be nominated as House Speaker. Matt Galka, CBN News.
Well, our CBN News chief political analyst, David Brody, is now with us, and former President Trump is now weighing in. He's saying all Republicans should vote for McCarthy. Do you think this will be enough to flip the holdouts?
I don't think so, Gordon. This has always been bigger than Trump. This is a proxy war between the populists, and it's not even a strain anymore. It's a populist part of the party, the MAGA party. Think of it as Tea Party on steroids, versus the establishment Republicans. And look, Donald Trump is weighing in here, and it's pretty clear why. He doesn't like PR disasters. He wants to have people come together. It looks bad for Republicans. He's always looking at optics, and he doesn't want to see these bad optics play out. That's the reason he's backing McCarthy. I mean, he's not the biggest Kevin McCarthy fan in the world, but he wants this to kind of go away, and so do a lot of other people. So where are we left with at this point? I mean, look, at this point, the Republicans are making Kim Kardashian and the Kardashians and all of that like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood at this point. I mean, it's like a Real Housewives episode, and it's expected to get even worse. I mean, I don't see this ending anytime soon, Gordon.
Well, this is political theater, and it's political theater of historic proportions. Are you buying into the argument that these holdouts are somehow helping the Democrats, that they're giving the Democrats an open door, if you will, to criticize Republicans, that Republicans don't have the capacity to actually govern?
No, I don't buy that at all. I've spoken to many sources. As a matter of fact, some of those 19 congressmen I know in a personal way as it relates to relationships that I have with them when accumulating stories. And I can tell you that they're doing this on principle. This is not about concessions. You know, we hear a lot about, well, horse trading and, if you give me this, it's not about that. It's not. I hate to put it in these terms, but I just take it more from a phrase standpoint, but they want Kevin McCarthy's head on a scalp. I mean, that's what they want. They want his scalp. And why exactly? You say why? There's a lot of reasons for it. He put money into backing center-right conservatives rather than kind of MAGA, ultra-MAGA conservatives. That's part of it during the primary process. But it's more than that. They see him as part of the uniparty in Washington, someone that's just going to cut deals at the last moment and pass an omnibus plan for $1.7 trillion and all of that stuff. Now, once again, McCarthy was against the omnibus bill. But what they are saying is that he's not fighting hard enough to try and stop it, that he's just kind of going along to get along, that we've seen this in Washington for, all the times, Gordon, you and I talk about how Washington never changes. That's what they're fighting against. They're fighting against people like Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, Ronna McDaniel's having the same problem with the RNC. People like this, especially McConnell, who've been in Washington for a very long time, and they say, look, enough. Let's actually get things done, and let's make sure we stop the spending, which instead passing these omnibus bills through at the last moment, it's just not the way it should work. Washington should work.
Well, if not McCarthy, and in an odd way, this is sort of a repeat. I mean, he was trying to be Speaker about 7 years ago. So if not him, and 7 years ago, he withdrew. He didn't want to go to a floor fight. Today, it seems like he really wants to go to the mat on this, and he's in for the long term. But if not him, who could be Speaker?
Well, it's a great question. We don't have any firm answers. I mean, if I'm a betting man, I'm not, by the way, but if I was, politically at least, I'd probably put my money on Steve Scalise, and everybody would say, well, hold on for a second. Steve Scalise endorsed McCarthy. He's with McCarthy. He'd kind of be the same ilk of McCarthy. Yes, but he's not Kevin McCarthy. Number one. Number two, he has that, compelling story about being shot at the baseball game, the congressional baseball game. It's a different situation with Scalise. I think what could end up happening, and just so everybody understands, Scalise is number two behind McCarthy. I think what could happen here is that these 20 no's for McCarthy, what may happen is some of them, at least 15 to 16 of them, would vote present on Scalise. In other words, they wouldn't take a stand either way. That would lower the threshold to get the amount of speakers you wouldn't need, amount of votes to become Speaker. You wouldn't need 218. And at that point, Scalise could become the person. That could be possible. Jim Jordan's an outside shot. There's talk of some sort of person outside of Congress. I don't see that happening. It might be another Republican like Patrick McHenry. That could be a possibility. But once again, this is a disaster. I got to tell you, Gordon, there's an interesting bit of history. Kevin McCarthy said in Matt's piece there, he talked about how if he has to set the record for the most votes, well, he's got a long way to go for most votes to become House Speaker. That was in 1856. Nathaniel Banks in 1856, 133 votes before he became Speaker. That means we could have another, 130, 131? That's the way McCarthy would get that record.
Well, how long do you think this is going to happen? It's clearly we're going to go beyond days. So are we into weeks? Could we be looking at months before we have a Congress?
We really could, and here's why. Because Kevin McCarthy says he's not going anywhere. I mean, he has 200 votes right now. So his position is, why should I be the one dropping out? Well, the answer is because you don't have the votes. But he says he's not going to go anywhere. Well, if he doesn't go anywhere, and if horse trading concessions isn't the issue, and they're stuck on principle, these 20 folks, which is a good thing. I mean, if you're fighting for principle, I guess in theory that's good. Then you've got both sides entrenched at this point. That's why I think the Scalise option could give these 20 a way out by saying, look, I'm not voting for Scalise, by saying I'm present for the vote, but it does get Republicans moving towards, in essence, governing, because you're right, Gordon, they can't do anything. They can't govern. Remember, these folks that are voting right now for McCarthy or against McCarthy, they're all representative elects. They have not been sworn in. There's no House business that can get done until this gets done, and that could be months.
Well, going back to the omnibus bill, were people looking at this contentious election saying, well, we've got to make sure the government's funded? And is that the reason that thing passed?
Well, yeah, it is. I think that what they're saying is, why are we doing this at the last minute? Why are we doing a 1,000-page bill where we have 12 hours to read it at the last moment? There are mechanisms in place. So, for example, the Senate passed the omnibus bill, and then there were a bunch of these 19, the House Freedom Caucus, many members that sent a letter over to the Senate, said, we're going to resist you at every single turn. The problem is Kevin McCarthy didn't sign that letter. Kevin McCarthy, in essence, did not agree with the House Freedom Caucus to fight it tooth and nail. That's the stuff they're talking about. Like if you're going to say, if you're just going to pass the omnibus in December right before Christmas, then they're like, look, this is the same old Washington, and we want new leadership, and that's what this is really all about.